My name is Emma Collins. I'm 35 years old now. 17 years ago, on the night I turned 18, my parents handed me 2 black trash bags filled with my clothes and told me not to come back. My father wouldn't even look at me. My mother simply folded her arms and said, "Your grandmother needs peace. We can't keep sacrificing this family because of you." They closed the front door before I could answer. By the time I realized they weren't bluffing, the deadbolt had already clicked into place. 17 years later, those same 2 people walked into my grandmother Eleanor's estate lawyer's office wearing expensive clothes and confident smiles. My mother had already picked out contractors to remodel the mansion. My father was discussing investment plans over the phone while waiting for the meeting to begin. They believed everything my grandmother owned was finally about to become theirs. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had spent nearly 2 decades preparing for that exact afternoon. She hadn't forgotten a single lie. She hadn't ignored a single dollar they stole. And she had left behind something far more devastating than a will. If you've ever been treated like you didn't belong by the very people who were supposed to love you, leave a comment below and subscribe. Because what happened inside that conference room changed 4 lives forever. It all started the night I turned 18. I wasn't coming home from a party. There hadn't been one. Birthdays were never important in our house unless they belonged to my parents. I had just finished my shift at a grocery store in Cedar Ridge, Oregon. It wasn't glamorous work. I spent 6 hours stocking shelves and cleaning spilled cereal while listening to the same playlist repeat every night. Before I left, my supervisor handed me a tiny cupcake with a single candle stuck in the frosting. "Happy birthday, Emma," she said with a smile. It was the only birthday gift I received that year. I carried the cupcake all the way home in a little cardboard box, trying not to ruin the frosting during the 2-mile walk. The October air was freezing. Leaves scraped across the sidewalks, while a cold drizzle soaked through my jacket. I remember thinking, maybe my parents had forgotten my birthday. People forget things. People get busy. Maybe there would still be dinner waiting. Maybe Mom had baked something after all. Sometimes hope makes fools out of us. When I reached our house on Willow Creek Lane, something felt wrong immediately. The porch light was off. Every window downstairs was dark except the kitchen. I reached into my pocket for my house key. It slid into the lock. It turned halfway, then stopped. I frowned. I tried again. Half a turn, nothing. I looked closer. The brass lock looked newer than I remembered. Tiny scratches surrounded the screws. Fresh metal, fresh paint around the frame. Someone had replaced it that afternoon. While I was at work, I knocked once. No answer. I knocked harder. The kitchen light came on. Footsteps approached. The door opened just enough for my mother's face to appear. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked organized, like someone crossing another task off a checklist. "The key doesn't work," I said. "I know." I think the lock was changed. It was. I laughed nervously because surely this had to be a misunderstanding. "Can you open the door?" No. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rainwater dripped from my hair onto the porch. Then she reached behind the door and handed me 2 large black trash bags. "My things? Everything that belonged to you." I stared at her. "I don't understand. You're 18 now." "I know. You wanted independence." "I never said that." She ignored me. "Your grandmother's health is becoming fragile. Your attitude creates stress in this house. We're choosing peace." "My attitude?" She looked past me into the darkness. "As far as the rest of the family is concerned, you decided to leave." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" "It'll be easier for everyone." You're lying." "No. You haven't even talked to Grandma." "We've talked to everyone who matters." I looked through the narrow opening. My father stood inside the dining room. He was polishing a crystal glass with a dish towel. He knew I was standing outside. He never looked up. Not once. The front hallway where I'd hung my backpack every school day. The staircase where I'd sat every Christmas morning. The family photos on the wall. I could see all of it through the crack in the door. None of it belonged to me anymore. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. What am I supposed to do? My mother reached into her robe pocket and handed me a white envelope. Inside was $400 in cash and the address of a local church shelter. That's enough to get started. "You planned this?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said something I'll never forget. Sometimes removing one person is the only way to save a family. Then she closed the door. The deadbolt clicked. The porch light turned off. I stood there for what felt like an hour before I realized I was still holding the little birthday cupcake. The frosting had collapsed. The candle had snapped in half. I left it on the porch railing. I never looked back. That night, I slept on a narrow cot inside a church shelter across town. The room held 23 strangers. Someone coughed all night. Someone cried quietly behind a curtain. I stared at the ceiling until nearly dawn, wondering how an entire life could disappear in a single evening. Around 6 the next morning, my phone vibrated. The number wasn't saved. The message contained only one sentence. Don't believe everything they've told you. Meet me Saturday at 11. Come alone. There was no name beneath it. But something about those words made me keep breathing. I had no idea that one message would change the next 17 years of my life. I almost deleted the message. At 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, anonymous texts usually meant spam or wrong numbers. I stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes before slipping the phone back into my pocket. I had bigger problems. The church shelter only allowed guests to stay for 30 days. I had 29 left. That first week after my parents threw me out felt less like living and more like surviving 1 hour at a time. I found another part-time job cleaning offices after my grocery store shift ended. Most nights I didn't get back to the shelter until after 10. The women there were kind, but kindness doesn't erase humiliation. Every evening I unpacked my life from 2 black trash bags and packed it again the next morning. I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans in rotation. I washed my clothes in a laundromat every Wednesday. I counted every dollar before buying food. Meanwhile, my parents were busy writing an entirely different story. Within a week, relatives started calling. First, it was Aunt Denise. Emma, your mom says you're going through something. I'm fine. Sweetheart, nobody throws away a good family for no reason. I didn't leave. There was silence. Then she sighed. I hope one day you'll admit you need help. She hung up before I could explain. Next came my cousin Ryan. Then Uncle Michael. Then neighbors I'd known since childhood. Every conversation sounded almost identical. Your parents are worried. They tried everything. Grandma is too sick to handle the stress. We hope you come to your senses. I stopped defending myself after the 5th phone call. People believe the first story they hear, especially when it comes from smiling people. The hardest part wasn't losing my home. It was realizing how quickly I had been erased from it. One afternoon during my lunch break, curiosity got the better of me. I opened Facebook. My mother had uploaded a photograph. She and my father stood beside Grandma Eleanor in the garden behind the family estate. Grandma smiled politely at the camera. The caption read, "Family isn't about perfection. It's about protecting the people you love." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. You two are angels. Your mother raised you right. So inspiring. My mother replied to nearly every comment with folded hands emojis and little hearts. I stared at the screen until my break ended. Grandma looked tired. Not unhappy, just tired. For one terrifying moment, I wondered if she actually believed everything they'd said about me. Saturday finally arrived. I almost didn't go. The text had included only an address. Maple and Main Bakery. 11 o'clock. The bakery sat on a quiet corner nearly 40 minutes from the shelter. It smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread the moment I stepped inside. There were only 4 customers. An elderly waitress looked up as soon as I entered. "You must be Emma." I froze. "Excuse me?" She smiled. "Back booth." She didn't ask my name. She already knew it. My heart started pounding. I walked slowly toward the back of the bakery. Someone was sitting in the corner booth with a newspaper folded neatly beside a cup of tea. Gray sweater, silver hair, reading glasses. My grandmother. She looked up before I spoke. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." I couldn't move. For nearly 10 seconds, I simply stared at her. "You." She smiled gently. "Sit down." I slid into the booth across from her. "I thought?" "I know what you thought." "You knew?" "I've known everything." Tears burned behind my eyes. "They said you wanted me gone." Grandma reached across the table and quietly pushed a warm blueberry muffin toward me. "When was the last time you ate breakfast?" I looked down. "I don't remember." "Then eat first." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the first bite. She waited patiently, not asking questions, not making speeches, just watching to make sure I finished eating. Only then did she speak again. I never told them to throw you out. I felt the room disappear. They said, I know exactly what they said. Then why didn't you stop them? She looked out the bakery window for several moments before answering, because sometimes people reveal far more when they think nobody is watching. I frowned. I don't understand. You will. She folded her hands neatly on the table. Emma, from this moment forward, we're going to meet here every Saturday. What about Mom and Dad? They can never know. Why? Because the moment they discover we're still talking, they'll become careful. She leaned slightly closer. And careful people stop making mistakes. A chill ran through me. What mistakes? Instead of answering, she reached into her purse and placed a small leather notebook on the table. Inside the cover, she'd written one sentence. Patience always outlives deception. I want you to remember that. She looked directly into my eyes. There are 3 rules, I nodded. First, never tell anyone about these meetings. Okay. Second, I will not rescue you. I blinked. What? I won't buy you a house. I wasn't asking. I know. I won't hand you enough money to avoid hardship either. I stared at her. Then why am I here? Because I can teach you something much more valuable. She smiled softly. I can teach you how to build a life no one will ever be able to take away. She paused before continuing. And the third rule. Her expression became serious. No matter what your parents say, no matter what they do, you will never argue with them. But they ruined my life. For now. For now? She nodded once. Some people spend years digging a hole for themselves. She sipped her tea. The wisest thing you can do is hand them the shovel. I didn't fully understand what she meant. Not that day, not even that year. But 17 years later, when the lawyer dimmed the lights inside that conference room, I finally understood that my grandmother had never been playing defense. She had been building something my parents never saw coming. The next 17 years didn't happen all at once. They happened one quiet Saturday at a time. Every weekend, I met Grandma Eleanor at the same bakery. She never gave me stacks of cash or promised to fix my life. Instead, she taught me how to build one. She taught me budgeting before investing, negotiation before confidence, patience before success. When people underestimate you, she often said, don't interrupt them. I worked mornings at the grocery store and evenings cleaning office buildings. Later, I earned a scholarship to community college. After graduation, I joined a financial planning firm, slowly working my way up until I became one of its youngest senior advisors. For years, I believed every scholarship and opportunity came from hard work alone. I had no idea Grandma had quietly arranged anonymous grants whenever tuition deadlines approached. She never wanted credit. Meanwhile, my parents became local celebrities. Every holiday, they posted smiling family photos with Grandma, calling themselves devoted caregivers. Friends praised their sacrifice. Neighbors admired their kindness. Behind closed doors, however, they treated Grandma's estate like their own. They remodeled rooms without asking, sold antiques they claimed she no longer wanted, charged luxury vacations, expensive furniture, and personal expenses to her accounts. They thought Grandma was too old to notice. She noticed everything. Without telling anyone, she hired a forensic accountant to review every bank statement. A private investigator documented missing valuables. Every receipt, transfer, invoice, and signature was copied into organized binders. She never confronted my parents. She simply kept collecting evidence. One Saturday, after nearly 15 years of meetings, Grandma handed me an old brass compass. It belonged to your grandfather, she said. I turned it over in my hand. What does it do? She smiled. It doesn't point north. It points home. Before I could ask what she meant, she stood up, hugged me longer than she ever had before, and quietly whispered, "The day you're meant to understand. Someone else will already be too late." 3 months after giving me the compass, Grandma Eleanor suffered a minor stroke. My parents moved into her estate within a week. Publicly, they called it an act of love. Privately, they acted like they already owned the place. My mother hired decorators. My father met with real estate agents about the property's future. Neither of them realized Grandma had quietly updated every legal document months earlier. She even became close friends with a retired judge named Arthur Bennett, one of the few people who knew exactly what she was planning. Together with her attorney, Grandma prepared sealed envelopes, notarized statements, financial reports, and one final surprise that nobody expected. Then, on a snowy morning in February, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was filled with speeches about love and family. My father called her his greatest inspiration. My mother cried on cue. After the service, I overheard them standing near the front gate. "The lawyers' meeting is next week," my father whispered. "We'll renovate first," my mother replied. "Then we'll decide whether to sell." Neither of them noticed me standing only a few feet away. They were already spending money they hadn't inherited. 1 week later, I walked into the law office carrying nothing except the old brass compass Grandma had given me years earlier. My parents barely acknowledged me. They were too busy smiling. They had no idea that the lawyer wasn't preparing to reward them. He was preparing to expose them. As everyone took their seats, he opened a thick leather folder, adjusted his glasses, and quietly said, "Before we begin, Mrs. Eleanor Collins left very specific instructions for today." The room suddenly became silent. The lawyer waited until everyone was seated before opening the first envelope. He began with the routine gifts: a donation to the local children's hospital, money for Grandma's church, a gift to her longtime housekeeper. Everything sounded ordinary. My parents relaxed. My mother even smiled. Then the lawyer turned another page. "To my granddaughter, Emma Collins." The room became still. I leave my family estate, my investment portfolio, my commercial properties, and 90% of my remaining assets. My father's smile disappeared. My mother leaned forward. "There must be another page," she whispered. "There is," the lawyer replied, "but not the one you're expecting." He slid 2 sealed envelopes across the table. These were prepared specifically for Mr. and Mrs. Collins. My father tore his open. Inside were hundreds of pages: bank statements, property inventories, forensic accounting reports, photographs, copies of forged signatures, receipts dating back nearly 17 years. My mother's hands began to shake. "What is all this?" The lawyer didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a remote control. Mrs. Collins also instructed me to play one final recording. The lights dimmed. Grandma appeared on the television screen, smiling calmly from her study. "If you're watching this," she began, "then I've already said goodbye." She looked directly into the camera. "To my son and daughter-in-law, Hollis, you believed growing older meant I stopped noticing." She slowly held up one of the accounting binders. "I noticed every missing dollar." Another binder. "Every forged signature." Another. "Every lie you told about Emma." She paused. "You thought I chose you over my granddaughter." A gentle smile crossed her face. "I never did." She looked straight into the camera one last time. "I stayed silent because truth becomes much louder when it's allowed to finish speaking." The video ended. Nobody moved. The lawyer quietly broke the silence. "Every document in your envelopes has been duplicated and filed with the court. If you contest this will, every piece of evidence becomes part of the public record." My father's attorney slowly closed the folder. He looked at my parents and spoke only 4 words. "Don't file anything." For the first time in 17 years, my parents had absolutely nothing to say. 3 months later, I used part of my inheritance to create the Eleanor Collins Foundation, providing legal guidance and financial education for young adults abandoned by their families. I restored my grandmother's estate instead of selling it. The brass compass she gave me sits on the fireplace in the library. One evening, I finally discovered why she had given it to me. Hidden inside its base was a tiny folded note in her handwriting. It read, "Home was never a place they could give you. It was always the life you were strong enough to build yourself." That was my real inheritance. Not the house, not the money, but the woman my grandmother quietly helped me become.